Hi, I wanted to do another video on Islam. The last one was about jihad in The Reliance of the Traveler, which it's a classic manual of Islamic sacred laws. So this is where jihad comes from, which obviously comes from the Quran, which also comes from the Hadith, which this isn't the actual Hadith because the Hadith would be huge. It's got um, tons of different people who uh, who wrote down the traditions of Muhammad, like either things he said or things that he did. So this is just a book on how to understand the Hadith. Online is where I've read most of the Hadiths because they don't have it in one book. It's not like that kind of thing. So it would be like a volume of books, which I don't have room for. Anyway, so what I wanted to talk about today, one is we did talk about jihad from The Reliance of the Traveler, but not from the Quran. So I wanted to read to you from the Quran today about fighting in the way of Allah, which is jihad. And you could see my Quran is kind of ruined. It's barely holding together. It's kind of just taped and stuff. So I wrote down a lot of things that are highlighted in the Quran so that I don't ruin this any more than I already have. Just want you to know that it's not stuff I found on the internet that I download. It's stuff I typed out straight from my Quran. This translation is by Abdullah Yusuf Ali. And from what I've read and heard from practicing Muslims and Muslims who have left Islam, this is the best English version to quote from. So I'll be quoting from that. And then the hadiths are, like I said, different people who knew Muhammad, who witnessed something he did and they wrote about it, or they witnessed him saying something to them, and they wrote down what he said. So that's what the hadith is, and that's sacred as well as the Quran is to the Muslim, and so is the Islamic law. So all of those things are important. Okay, little tiny background. If you don't know how Islam came about, Muhammad was a 40-year-old man. He had been married to one woman. She's older than him. At the time, she must have been 55. 55, because I think she was 15 years older than him. So he was the leader of a caravan, and he was traveling a lot, and sometimes he would go up into the mountains and go into a cave and meditate. And one day while he was meditating, an entity came to him. Eventually he attributed it to be the angel Gabriel, but I wouldn't attribute that angel to the angel Gabriel. For one, he came and he terrified him. He grabbed him so tightly that he felt like he couldn't breathe, Muhammad. And he also yelled at him to read something that he had written in the sand. And Muhammad couldn't read at the time. He couldn't read or write. And so Muhammad told him he couldn't do it, and then the angel became more aggressive and pressed on him until he, he said again he couldn't do it. And then the third time, as he was being pressed, he thought he might even die. The third time after, he looked at the writing in the sand and he could read it. And so the writing in the sand was, "Read in the name of the Lord who created you from a clot. Read in the name of the Lord who created you, who taught men what he knew not." Okay, so that was what the so-called angel Gabriel had written down in the sand for Muhammad. Muhammad was terrified. He thought that he was being possessed. He thought maybe oppressed by a demon or something. He ran off was so terrified he hid under his covers in his bed, and his wife and his uncle convinced him that he was a prophet, that this was from God, and he believed them. So that's kind of how it started. He started taking in these trances or these meditative states. He would get what he would call they're like verses to us. They call them surahs in the Quran. All his revelations came through this angel straight from Allah to Muhammad. Muhammad either wrote down or told people to write down the different revelations, or whatever you'd call it. The first half of his ministry would be are the peaceful Quranic verses. The second half of his ministry are the jihadi, the more dominating, smite him at their necks, and women are worth half. All that stuff came the second half of his ministry, which was like the last 11 years when he was conquering and killing, and that was when he was marrying all his other wives and everything. There is a very important thing that you need to understand about Islam is that so there are some peaceful things. So if you hear a Muslim say something like peaceful, well, that was written down before Allah gave the harsher revelations. And how we're supposed to understand that is in Surah, it's one of the early ones. I think it's okay. It's in Surah 2. It's in Surah 2, 106. It says, "None of our revelations do we abrogate or cause to forget, but we substitute something better or similar. Don't you know that Allah is powerful?" Blah, blah, blah. So what the teaching is in Islam is that any teaching that seems to contradict another one, it can't possibly contradict it, but God is just saying, Allah is saying, this one's better. And so those peaceful ones are all substituted with the more, well, they're just straight out more graphic and cruel. So that's how you got to understand that, so that when I say these ones, you're like, oh, I'm sure they say nice things too. Well, they do, but these ones supersede them. And the other thing that you need to know, which is really important, is in Islam, there's this, you're allowed to lie to further Islam. Men are allowed to also lie to their wives if it keeps peace in the home. But the more important kind of lie is, it's called taqiyya. When you hear, like there's a Muslim on TV or on the news, like there is lots of times, I mean, I've seen tons of them since studying the faith. It's been 15 years now since I've been studying this faith. I have heard so many Muslims come on and say that it's a peaceful religion, that that the jihadis are twisting the faith. I mean, our president says that all of the time, that they're taking this wonderful, beautiful, peaceful faith and they're distorting it or twisting it or falsely using it to justify what they're doing. What I'm here to say is that is not true, and I don't believe that he thinks that that's true, because he did go to a Quranic school, an Islamic school in Indonesia for several years. And the thing is that in those schools you memorize the Quran. So he knows the verses that I'm going to read to you, and yet he still says that. And so that's questionable, like really questionable. Like, why does he do that? But that's really for another time. What I'm trying to get through here is that you can lie to further Islam. Any Muslim can lie to further Islam. And it's called taqiyya. It permits Muslims to lie to non-Muslims about Islam if it is done in the case of Allah. So Muhammad taught that there are two forms of lying to non-believers that are permitted under certain circumstances: taqiyya and kitman. These circumstances are typically those that advance the cause of Islam. Okay, so in some cases, by gaining the trust of non-believers in order to draw out their vulnerability and then defeat them, like so you could like go into their country and say you're going to be following their laws and not going to try to bring in Sharia and that kind of thing. It could be something like that. But it could also be as small as you're a friend with a Muslim and they tell you that, you know, Islam doesn't call for jihad, or jihad is an internal struggle and not a struggle against non-believers. Okay, so one of the places that it talks about this is in the Quran. It's Surah 3 to 28. Surah 3:28. This verse tells Muslims not to take those outside the faith as friends unless it is to guard themselves against them. And then in Surah 9:3, and this is a quote, Allah and his messengers dissolve treaties with the pagans, unbelievers. So they make a treaty with us or with somebody. Allah can dissolve them because he can, and he says he will. Surah 66:2, Allah has already ordained for you the desolation of your oaths. So you can make an oath, but he can remove it for you. In the Hadith, this one's written by Bukhari, Bukari, 49:857. He who makes peace between the people by inventing good information or saying good things is not a liar. Lying is permitted when the end justifies the means. From the Reliance of the Traveler, remember that other book that I showed you? It says on page 746, 8.2, speaking is a means to achieve objectives. If a praiseworthy aim is attained through both telling the truth and lying, it is unlawful to accomplish through lying, because there is no need for it. When it is possible to achieve such an aim by lying, but not by telling the truth, it is permissible to lie if attaining the goal is permissible. So the goal, it being something that's good, a good outcome. You can lie to make that happen. So you need to understand that that's like something very ingrained in Islam. So and since we're unbelievers, they can lie to us at any time to further Islam, and believe me, they do, because I hear it all the time on the news, and even from a very good friend of mine who's Muslim. So, okay, so I wanted to kind of give you those little foundations. There's lots more, and if you guys ever have any questions, you can, make a comment down below, and I will do the best I can to answer your questions. But for now, I wanted to show you, since we talked about the jihad from the Reliance of the Traveler, I wanted to tell you, not all, because there's a ton of surahs in the Quran that are about jihad, but I'm just going to give you some of the more direct ones and the easiest ones to understand. So in the Quran, Surah 4:89, those who reject Islam must be killed. If they turn back from Islam, meaning if they leave Islam, take them and kill them wherever you find them, okay? And you've heard of these people who, like their own parents, try to kill them because they've left Islam. It's from this verse that they get that idea that that's a good thing to do, because this is supposedly directly from Allah, right? Through Angel Gabriel and Muhammad. Surah 47:4. So when you meet in jihad those who disbelieve, smite their necks till when they have when you have killed and wounded many of them, then bind a bond firmly on them and take them as captives, which is what they usually do with women and children. They usually kill the men, cut off their heads, and then they take the women as sex slaves and the children sometimes as sex slaves, but they definitely require the women and children to become Muslim by force. Surah 9, 123. O you who believe, fight those of the unbelievers who are close to you, and let them find harshness in you, and know that Allah is with those who are the pious. Surah 8:39. And fight them until there is no more disbelief, and the religion will be for Allah alone in the whole world. But if they cease worshipping other gods besides Allah, then certainly Allah is all seer of what they do. Surah 495. Allah has preferred in grades those who strive hard and fight with their wealth and their lives above those who sit at home. So what he's saying there is God prefers those who go out and fight with their wealth and their bodies and their lives, rather than those who proclaim to know the truth but then don't go out and fight. Unto each Allah has promised good, which is paradise, but Allah has preferred those who strive hard and fight above those who sit at home by a huge reward. Okay, so it's a big difference to Allah, those who fight in the way of Allah and in jihad, than those who sit at home and don't do anything. So they could still be Muslims, those ones that sit at home, but God prefers those who go out and fight. So you could see if like you really believed in Allah and you really loved him or whatever, you worshipped him, you'd want to go out and fight, because he says he prefers the people that do that. So when you hear that they're distorting it or they're not living the true faith, I beg to differ. They're living the true faith exactly the way that you're supposed to. So yeah, that was 9. Okay, and then in Surah 9:81, they hated to. So he's talking about people who didn't want to fight in this surah. They hated to strive and fight with their goods and their persons in the cause of Allah. They said, "Do not go forth in the heat. Say the fire of hell is fiercer in heat." If only they could understand. Obviously, if you don't fight, Allah is saying you might go to hell here. He's saying, oh, it's too hot to go out and fight. That's what he's saying that people are complaining about. And then he's saying, hell is a much fiercer heat, so go out and fight anyways. Surah 9:29 says, "Fight those who do not believe in Allah, nor the last day, nor hold that forbidden which has been forbidden by Allah and his messenger, nor acknowledge the religion of truth, which is Islam, even if they are people of the book, which are Christians and Jews, until they pay the jizya, which is a tax for being non-Muslim, with willing submission and feel themselves subdued." Okay? So you think these people, they come, the followers of Islam, you think they come to America and want to become American and still be Muslim? Because can you be American and tax other people for being non-Muslim? Can you subdue other people because they don't believe what you believe in America? So what do you think they're doing when they're coming here? If they know this, which I know, so they know, right? I don't know. Think about it. So also in Surah 9:44, those who believe in Allah and the last day ask you for no exemptions from fighting with their goods in person. And Allah knows who those who do their duty are. Speaks for itself, right? And Surah 9:5, then fight and slay the pagans wherever you find them, and seize them in every stratagem. But if they repent and become Muslim, then open the way for them, for Allah is oft forgiving, most merciful. Oh, how sweet he is. Okay, so you could see that jihad is not just something that was a tradition or something that Muhammad did only, which would still be binding, by the way, but that the Quran is full of it. full of fighting non-Muslims, Christians, and Jews. There's actually some really terrible things that the Quran says about Jewish people, and it's really important for you to understand, because if you think that Islam hates Jewish people because the British gave back the land to the Jewish people after World War II, and the Palestinians, and it's all about the Palestinians and the Jews. That is just an excuse, because the Quran was written in 600 AD. Okay, so 1400 years ago, so 1300 years before World War II ended. Okay, long before that, this is what Islam was teaching about Jews. Okay, so in Surah 4:46 it says, "Of the Jews, Allah has cursed them." In Surah 5:60, those who incur the curse of Allah, so Allah has cursed the Jews, and so for those who incurred the curse of Allah, which is the Jews, and his wrath, those of whom some he transformed into apes and swine. Okay, so some of the Jews were transformed into apes and swine. So that's where they get the whole you can't eat pigs, because they could be Jewish people. Okay, that's Surah 5:60. For the unbelievers are open enemies to you. Surah 4:101. Speaking of the Jews, amongst them we have placed. Okay, now we in the Quran is like the royal we, okay? So it just means Allah, okay? So among them, among the Jews, we have placed enmity and hatred until the day of judgment. Every time they kindle the fire of war, Allah extinguishes it. But they ever strive to do mischief on earth, and Allah does not love those who do mischief. Surah 5:64, okay? Right there, it's super clear that God says, I have placed enmity between you and the Jewish people until the day of judgment, which is the end of time in the Muslim tradition, okay, and the same as in Christian tradition. So it has nothing to do with the Palestinians and the Jews having their land and what happened after World War II, just so you understand. Okay, then the Quran also says in Surah 5:78, curses were pronounced on those among the children of Israel who rejected faith, who rejected Muhammad's version of faith, which is Islam. I already read this one, which is Surah 9, fight those who do not believe. Yep. Okay. So those who believe in Allah and the last day ask you for no exemption from fighting with their goods and persons, and Allah knows well who does their duties. So, it's super clear in the Quran that you need to fight the Jews and the Christians, but especially the Jews, right? The Christians, you could let them maybe pay a tax if they, if there's many of them and you want to live in peace with them, but you certainly don't have to. You can fight them and slay them and smite their necks as much as you want, as long as it's going to further Islam, if they won't become Muslim. So it's very important that you guys understand this, because I haven't heard hardly any truth on the news from our politicians, from our president, when it comes to Islam. If we don't inform ourselves, then we are going to end up with Sharia in this country. I'm telling you that right now. And you don't want to live under that. Where is it that, how women are treated under Islamic teaching is just disgusting, really. Let me find it here. So basically, at least 3 times, I know that I've written down 3 different surahs that have women being worth half. And then another surah where you're, as a man, you're allowed to beat your wife. So let's see. First, in Surah 2, 282, it says, Get 2 witnesses out of your own men, and if there are not 2 men, then a man and 2 women, so that if one of the women errs, the other can remind her. Okay, because she'd be stupid as being a woman. You'd have to have another one backing her up. In Surah 4:176, the male having twice the share of the female to Allah. So that's, and then in Surah 4:34 it says, as to those women on whose part you fear disloyalty and ill conduct, admonish them, refuse to share their beds, and beat them. But if they return to obedience, do not seek against them means. Okay, so yay, how nice for those ladies. So I can't imagine. And then in some of the hadiths, Muhammad says that hell is populated by women and Jews. So you hear what Allah says about Jews. So that's basically what Muhammad said, that that is filling hell is women and Jews. So there you go. I can't imagine why any woman would purposely become Muslim. I think most of them do it by force, but then those that know better and have a choice, I don't know. It's difficult to understand. But anyway, so that's all for today. There's plenty more. I do want to get into what the Quran says about Jesus at some point, because there is a Jesus in the Quran. It's not our Jesus. It claims it is, but from what I'll read to you at some point, you'll know that it's not him. They also have a very interesting end time scenario, which coincides with Christian end time scenario, except of course all our good guys are their bad guys, and all our bad guys are their good guys. So it's kind of an interesting little thing. But for now, I hope this showed you a little bit more of the truth of Islam, what it actually teaches, and dispels a lot of those taqiyya myth lies that are told to us by practicing Muslims on the news. And for those who believe those lies and perpetuate them, which would be the newscasters, I would imagine, unless I can't even really understand why none of them have read the Quran yet. But anyways, so that's it. If you have any questions or comments, I feel free to comment below. These aren't my opinions. That's why I read directly from their own books, because if you're Muslim and you're going to start spouting off that you don't have to do this stuff, you're not going to fool me. You can say whatever you want to say, but I know better now. So you're not going to be fooling me. All right? Thanks, guys.